The psychology of solitude. Why being alone terrifies us and how to find strength in it, awake within. What happens when the noise stops? When the room falls silent and no one is around, not even a screen to distract you. Most PO. PLE would say they're fine being alone, until they are. In this video, we explore a quiet fear that haunts many without them knowing. The fear of being alone with themselves. Not loneliness in the social sense, but a deeper solitude where no distractions remain. Only you and your unfiltered thoughts. Stay with us as we unfold why silence terrifies us, and how this fear, if understood, can become the very path to inner strength, clarity, and emotional freedom. The fear of loneliness, when silence becomes the enemy of the mind. Humans are creatures of connection. We are born yearning to be heard, to be seen. To exist in the gaze of others. But behind the laughter, behind the lively conversations, lies a quiet fear few dare to name, the fear of loneliness. Not merely the fear of being physically alone, but the fear of being left with ourselves, without distraction, without escape, without someone else to lean on. We often believe that only the unfortunate, the rejected, or the failures are lonely. But the truth is harsher. Loneliness can live within us even when we are surrounded by people. It creeps in when we realize that the bonds we have are shallow. The words we exchange are surface level, and even in our closest relationships, there remains a part of ourselves that no one ever touches. That's when silence begins to echo. A silence not from the outside world, but from within, from the place we've never dared to explore. In that silence, questions begin to echo back at us. Who am I if no one reflects me? Do I still exist if no one sees me? In the past, solitary confinement was used to punish dangerous criminals. Because it was understood that isolation could slowly erode the human mind. Today, no walls or bars are needed. Many live inside a spiritual prison of their own making, where facing oneself is more terrifying than anything outside. Rather than learning to live with ourselves, we run from it. We bury ourselves in work, entertainment, social media, fleeting relationships, anything loud enough to drown out the voice inside. But the more we run, the more it waits. Because the darkness within does not disappear, it only grows stronger in hiding. The truth is, silence is not the enemy. But the raw presence it forces upon us is terrifying. Loneliness compels us to confront the parts of our identity we've long denied. And in that confrontation, we might finally see ourselves clearly, without the mask that society taught us to wear. If we never learn to be alone, we will always rely on others to feel worthy. And when those connections break, we shatter too. Loneliness, when misunderstood, is not just a lack of company, it is an existential crisis. And unless we move through it, we may never be truly connected to anyone, not even ourselves. Facing the self, the confrontation with the inner beast. When the outer world falls silent, the inner world begins to speak. That's when the thoughts we've ignored, the emotions we've suppressed, and the memories we've buried start to rise. We are not used to this uprising. It feels like a storm inside a sealed room, no exit, no one to share it with. In daily life, we often avoid uncomfortable feelings by staying busy, with work, with people, with responsibilities. But when all distractions are stripped away, the first thing to emerge is usually the shadow within: anger, shame, jealousy, fear, insecurity. Nietzsche once wrote, "What one brings into solitude grows there, the beast within included." He wasn't trying to scare us, but to warn: isolation can be either an opportunity or a trap. If we lack the strength to face and accept that beast, it will devour us from the inside. That's why many who fall into deep solitude spiral into anxiety, depression, or self-destructive behavior. Not because they are weak, but because they were never prepared to face their raw inner self, without layers of distraction to protect them. The truth is, There's a shadow in every human being, and that's not inherently bad. That beast carries pain, but also potential. The question isn't how to eliminate it, but how to understand, tame, and integrate it. Some people choose to walk into solitude and use it as a mirror, to observe, to reflect, to transform. But such individuals are rare. Most of us fear what we don't understand. And because no one teaches us how to face ourselves, we only learn how to cover it up. What's more terrifying than loneliness is seeing ourselves with such clarity that there's nowhere left to hide. Yet in that moment of confrontation lies a rare opportunity, a chance to be reborn from within. If we dare to remain in the truth of who we are. Emotional dependency, a false escape from loneliness. When people can't endure loneliness, they often seek others not to truly connect, but to escape. Some relationships don't begin with love, but with fear. It's not, I need you because I love you, it's, without you, I'll fall apart. We call it affection. But often it's just attachment. A form of emotional addiction we fail to notice. Like someone jumping into the sea not because they want to swim, but because they can't stand still on the shore. They cling to others like a life raft, and when that raft drifts away, they feel like they're drowning. Nietzsche once said, "One man runs to his neighbor to find himself, another to lose himself." In both cases, the person cannot stay with themselves. We avoid our inner emptiness by filling it with someone else, hoping another can cover the void within us. But no one can do that forever. When we rely on others to define our worth, we unknowingly give them control over who we are. And when that person becomes the center of our feelings, our confidence, our identity, then losing them feels like losing everything. Ernest Becker warned about this. He said that when we idealize our partner, making them the standard of truth, value, even meaning, we place the burden of a god on the shoulders of a human. And that inevitably leads to dependency, disappointment, and resentment. Emotional dependency not only kills love, but also erases our ability to stand on our own. It turns relationships into shelters instead of spaces for growth. We stay out of fear of loss, not because we see each other freely. Unless we realize this, we'll keep running from person to person, hoping someone will save us from loneliness. But loneliness is something no one else can heal for you, except you. The false self, when fear of abandonment turns you into someone else. When we fear rejection, abandonment, or emotional pain, we begin to put on a mask. It's not who we truly are, but a version we believe others will accept. We smile at the right time, nod when expected, behave the way we think we should. The more we fear losing connection, the more we try to become someone else, just to be kept. Donald Winnicott called this the false self, a psychological defense that forms when we stop living from genuine feeling and start reacting to our environment. Over time, we lose touch with our real desires, and can't distinguish between what we truly want and what we do just to please others. The false self can help us fit in, especially in a society where acceptance is often conditional. But the cost is steep, we lose the feeling of authenticity. Every time we suppress ourselves, stay silent when we want to speak, say yes when we want to say no, a part of us gets buried deeper. At first, we think we're protecting ourselves. But in the long run, we're only suppressing who we are. Emotions don't disappear, they get pushed into the dark, waiting to return as anxiety, depression, explosive anger, or a vague emptiness we can't explain. Living too long in the false self makes us doubt our own emotions. We question our intuition, second-guess our reactions, and lose the ability to define our value. Every judgment becomes dependent on how others see us. The capacity to be alone, according to Winnicott, is what allows us to break free from the false self. In solitude, there's no one to perform for, no social context to adapt to. That's when we begin to listen to our real emotions, our real needs, and reconnect with the self we abandoned. Returning to our true self is not easy. It requires giving up the comfort of being accepted in exchange for the risk of being honest. But only then can we live fully, no longer running. No longer acting, no longer being someone else's shadow in our own life. Love or dependency? Breaking the illusion of relationship as life's meaning. From the moment we're born, we live in the arms of others, parents, family, friends, lovers. Over time, we form a deep belief: relationships are the center of life. No one can live alone, we're told. And so, instead of seeing others as companions on the path, we begin to see them as the destination. Modern society, with its intense culture of attachment, reinforces the idea that if we don't have someone to love, share with, or grow old with, then life is somehow meaningless. But this belief creates an invisible pressure. When we need someone else to feel whole, we don't just give them love, we give them ourselves. This leads to dependency. Love ceases to be freedom and becomes fear: fear of losing them, fear of being alone, fear that no one will walk with us to the end of the road. We cling to the other person as an escape from our inner emptiness. But this makes the relationship fragile, built not on abundance, but on lack. Abraham Maslow described our highest needs as meta-needs: truth, beauty, meaning, transcendence. These things cannot be fulfilled by another person. Ernest Becker wrote, "You cannot get spirituality from a physical being. When we expect our partner to be everything we're missing, from inspiration to life's purpose, we're deifying a human. And idols always fall. A relationship built on neediness carries shadows of expectation, disappointment, and control. But when it comes from inner fullness, it becomes a space for sharing, not clinging. In such relationships, the other is no longer an escape from ourselves, but a companion in our inner journey." And so, a question each of us must ask: do you turn to others out of love, or out of fear? Are you building something to grow together, or hiding from your own void? Only by facing this honestly can we tell the difference between true love and dependency disguised as affection. Creating in solitude, the journey to reshape the mind. Loneliness, when not misunderstood, isn't just a void to be filled, it's a fertile space where creativity can arise. In the silence of a room with no voices, where no one expects anything, where there is no judgment, we begin to hear echoes from within. And from there, something extraordinary can emerge: ideas, inspiration, expression, and even healing. Anthony Storr, a 20th-century psychiatrist, pointed out that solitude does not hinder personal growth. On the contrary, it can become a powerful force in reshaping our inner world. When we sit down to create, to write, to paint, to make music, to build, we're not just producing something external, but simultaneously organizing the chaos within ourselves. Creativity is the process of turning disorder into order. Jumbled emotions, scattered thoughts, unhealed wounds, all of it can be transformed when we channel our energy into something generative. Whether it's a sentence, a melody, a drawing, or even tending a small garden, that focused act helps realign the mind. In solitude, without external dialogue, we begin a dialogue with ourselves. And through creating something, we begin to redefine who we are, not by how others see us, but through our own direct experience of our inner world. Many think creativity is reserved for artists. But in truth, everyone has the capacity to create, because creativity is tied to the instinct to organize, heal, and express. A child molding clay, an elder knitting, a mother cooking, all are expressions of creativity in solitude. Fyodor Dostoevsky once wrote, "Solitude for the mind is as essential as food is for the body." Because when we create even the smallest thing, we affirm, "I exist, I have something to offer, and I am not being consumed by this invisible void." And from that process, we gradually rebuild our inner strength, not by resisting loneliness, but by transforming it into a place where a new self is shaped. Awakening in the dark, the power of mastering loneliness. Loneliness, at its deepest level, is not just a state, it's an inner challenge. It's a raw mirror reflecting the darkness within us. That's why Nietzsche warned, in solitude, the beast within grows. And Goethe said, there is nothing more dangerous than solitude. But why would anyone willingly walk into something so dangerous? Because they understand. Only by walking through the dark can we discover our own light. In that darkness, when the noise of the world fades, when roles disappear, when there's no one left to impress or please, we stand bare before our truest self. And in that confrontation, a door opens, the door to self-sovereignty. When a person no longer fears being alone, they become free. They're no longer someone who needs another to feel worthy. They no longer act to be accepted. They are simply themselves, fully and completely, even in solitude. Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "Do not let yourself be confused by that in you which wants to escape solitude. Trust in what is difficult, for that is something that will never betray you." Loneliness is uncomfortable, but precisely because it is difficult, it is worth enduring. One who masters loneliness is not someone who no longer feels it, but someone who is no longer controlled by it. They learn to live with it, to observe it, and more importantly, to transform it into strength. From that deep silence, true confidence begins to emerge, not the superficial kind, but a grounded calm that rises from within. At that point, the person is no longer bound by others' definitions. No longer needs praise to feel valuable, no longer clings to what no longer serves them out of fear. They can love, without clinging. They can share, without fear of abandonment. And it's this inner independence that makes every relationship healthier. Inner awakening is not a sudden act, but a process of walking through darkness, step by step. And loneliness, when approached with courage, can be the most silent yet trustworthy guide along the way. Loneliness is not a disease, dispelling modern misconceptions about solitude. In today's society, loneliness is often labeled negatively, as if it's a sign of failure, mental instability, or a lack of social ability. Those who are alone are seen as less adaptive, overly introverted, or even troubled. But there's something modern culture tends to ignore. Loneliness isn't always a symptom of suffering, sometimes it's a sign of depth. Choosing solitude does not necessarily mean someone is in pain. It might mean they've realized that some conversations are unnecessary, some relationships only exist to fill a void, and some connections no longer reflect anything real. In such cases, withdrawal is not escape, it's awakening. Yet, because society celebrates noise, inclusion, and constant digital presence, those who step back are often misunderstood as broken. But what if those individuals are the ones still holding on to clarity the rest have lost? We live in an era where every negative emotion is treated as something to eliminate. Feelings of loneliness, boredom, isolation, all seen as symptoms rather than signals. We're taught to avoid rather than to listen. But every emotion has a purpose. And sometimes, that sense of disconnection is a call to return inward, to examine how we live, how we connect, what we seek from others that we've never asked ourselves. Loneliness is not a disease to cure, it is a state to understand. When we understand it, we no longer fear it. When we stop fearing it, it stops controlling us. And only then can solitude become a space of rebirth, where the self can be reshaped honestly. Instead of asking, how do I escape loneliness, perhaps we should ask, what is loneliness trying to tell me? The answer might lead you somewhere deeper than any conversation ever could. Healing emotions through silence, restoring the mind in stillness. Some pains don't need comforting words, only a large enough silence to be heard. Some emotions don't need explanation, only a non-judgmental space to exist. And there are times in life when what we truly need isn't someone else, it's ourselves, staying still, in silence. Modern life teaches us that the solution to sadness is action, do something, go somewhere, talk to someone. But sometimes, the deepest healing comes from doing nothing. Just sitting. With the sadness, with the emptiness, and allowing it to be, no avoidance, no resistance. Silence, if we're brave enough to enter, is a powerful healing space. It is where emotions return to their raw form, where the mind is no longer pulled by endless input. And where the heart can beat to its own rhythm again. When we practice intentional silence, through meditation, journaling, or simply sitting alone by a window, we begin to detach from the urge to react. And that space helps us see, pain is not the enemy, but a whisper from the soul that's been left untouched. Healing doesn't come from forgetting, but from fully feeling. In stillness, we learn to observe emotions like waves, rising and falling. We don't identify with them, don't let them define us. But also don't deny them. Silence is also where we hear the deepest voice within, the one drowned out by external noise. It might be a long-buried truth, a forgotten desire. Or a belief ready to be released. Not everyone is ready to enter silence. It takes courage. But once we do, once we allow ourselves to sit in that space without judging our emotions, without rushing to fix them, that's when healing begins. Because sometimes, what the mind truly needs, is to rest inside a silence filled with gentle presence. Finding meaning in life, feeling whole without needing anyone. We're often taught that the meaning of life lies in grand things, achievement, recognition, great love, contribution to society. But perhaps, true meaning isn't found outside, it's what we touch when we become quiet enough to hear the voice within. Many tie their existence to others. They feel valuable when someone needs them, loves them, validates them. But what happens when no one is there? When all the roles that defined us, partner, parent, employee, suddenly disappear. That question frightens many, but it's also where awakening begins. When there's no one to define ourselves through, we're forced to look inward and ask, who am I if not for anyone else? What wakes me each morning, if not the desire to please? The answers don't come easily, and that's what makes them precious. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived a concentration camp, once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Meaning isn't something ready-made. It's something we create in how we face life. And sometimes, those lonely moments that feel empty are the richest soil where meaning begins to grow. Meaning isn't something to seek as if it exists elsewhere. It's something to discover, through observing ourselves, immersing in what we love. Through the small things done with full presence. A slowly brewed cup of tea, a journal page written with honesty, a simple act of tidying up like caring for the mind, all can contain meaning. If we're truly present. Meaning isn't a peak to reach, it's awareness in every step. And one who can find it in solitude will never again fear emptiness. Because when we no longer need others to feel meaningful, every connection becomes free. No one has to fill anyone else. No one has to prove anything. Each person is a complete world, choosing to walk together, not leaning on each other to survive.